The first lie was small and bright, like a citrus peel on the pavement. In our city by the southern sea, lies don't arrive like storms. They show up like weather you ignore until you're soaked, salt on your lips, damp creeping into the cuffs of your life. We lived with open windows. We measured hours by the sound of the ferries, by the way the gulls harassed the fishermen, by the click of bottles and crates carried past the café I inherited from my father. The air tasted of oranges and diesel and the morning bread from the bakery across the square. On clear afternoons, the sea turned blue as enamel, and people used it like a mirror. My wife loved that mirror. Isabela had a way of standing at our balcony rail that made the water behave as if it owed her an answer. She painted tiles, small squares of sky, and boats and swallows, which she sold to tourists and to neighbors who still believed in decorating life with something that could break. She wore a silver chain with a swallow charm, and when she laughed, used her whole body as if laughter were a sport. We had been married 11 years, and some of them were good. In the mornings, we moved around each other in the kitchen like dancers who hadn't rehearsed enough, but still knew the music. On Sundays, we walked the breakwater to the lighthouse and argued about whether the city's new development would ruin the wind. At night, we fell asleep with the windows open and let the sea do the talking. The first lie appeared in a bowl on the cafe counter. A lemon knot from old Lara at the market, not with her nicks and scars, but too perfect, stamped at the end with a tidy sticker that said, Vera Export Choice. Isabela doesn't buy fruit with stickers. She swears it tastes like packaging. When I asked, she said, it came with the tiles, and kissed my cheek with distracted kindness, and the lemon rolled in the bowl and nudged the oranges like a guest with better clothes. It sounds like nothing. Maybe it was only a lemon. But in a city where we measure every day by what the sea brings and what it keeps, I noticed the way a current changes when a big ship passes out beyond the reef. The cafe espresso machine began to sputter sometimes, making a sound like a throat clearing before a confession. Isabela stopped humming when she washed her brushes. Her phone lived face down on the table, and on a Wednesday morning, the chain with the swallow was not around her neck. Did you take it off? I asked. She touched the bare place as if someone had stolen her name. It's at my mother's, she said. I broke the clasp. Don't look like that. Like what? Like I'm taking something from you, she said, and put the chain back on the next day with a new clasp. And I laughed the way men laugh when the wind turns, and they tell themselves the sky means well. 2 weeks later, the city's leading problem walked into my cafe wearing linen and an apology. Mateo Vega, the architect hired to turn the old shipyard into a hotel complex with 3 pools and 6 ways to feel better than your neighbors. He ordered a macchiato and a sparkling water and complimented the tiles on the counter with educated eyes. Your wife's? He asked. Yes. She has a hand for light, he said, sipping. You can tell when someone has the humility to leave the sun alone. He knew her name. He didn't need to ask. When he slid bills across the counter, I saw the faint impression on his ring finger, where a ring used to live. A pale band of truth the sun had not yet painted over. He smiled the smile of a man who treats every room like a courtroom he can win by tone. Good luck with the shipyard, I said. We have enough pools. People like water, he said, and left, cologne clean as a hospital corridor. That night, while I moved chairs and counted cash, Isabela stood at the open window and let the street lean into our house. The swallow at her throat glinted like a wink. He came into the cafe today, I said. Who? Vega. The architect. She shrugged. Everyone drinks coffee. People who want to change the city should start by learning how we stir sugar. He's not changing the sea, she said. He's changing where people look at it from. You sound like him. She turned to me, tired and beautiful and already far away. Maybe I'm trying on the words of people who aren't always angry. I'm not angry. You are the smell of anger, she said, and then put her head on my chest and used me like a wall you lean on while you decide whether to close a door. The second lie wasn't even a sentence. It was timing. Isabela started taking her morning walks at hours when the fishermen were still finishing theirs. She returned with hair damp and cheeks pricked with salt. And when I said, You went to the breakwater? She said, The beach. and put her basket on the table as if the question bored the bread. Her texts, once unremarkable like weeds, became a garden, trimmed too neat. On a Sunday, the city held a festival in the Old Quarter, strings of lights between balconies and a band on the steps of the church, children dragging paper boats on strings along the cobbles. We stood in the street with everyone we had ever known and shared the sweaty grace of summer. Isabela went to the bodega for more wine and returned a long time later, the bottle cold, her eyes hot. In the glow of the street lamps, I saw a fingerprint on her wrist back of the bone, just above the swallow chain. It could have been a shadow. It could have been a map. When I took her hand to put the bottle in it, she flinched, then forgave herself for flinching. "You're drunk," she said. "Not yet," I said. We didn't fight. We didn't use the words people use in garages and kitchens when a house remembers it has corners. We went home with the neighbors, with everyone's sweat and music on our skin, and slept as if we were still allowed. On the morning that changed everything, the wind failed and the city sweated. The sea lay in the bay like a polished bowl. The ferry left a crease, and the water closed it, patient, like a mother who knows how to forgive. I went to the fish market for sardines and chatter, and on the way back, near the Hotel Santa Marina, the old palace with the yellow awnings, I saw Isabela step from a taxi wearing her blue dress, the one we used to take turns daring. She moved with purpose through the lobby, like someone late to a class where charm was graded. I followed at a distance because that is the kind of man I had become. She crossed the cool marble hall and the piano that pretends to play itself and went up the stairs instead of to the bar. The desk clerk, who knows me the way cities know their small parts, said nothing. I stood in the shade of a column and watched the elevator's numbers glow one by one. 2, 3, 4, 5. She disappeared into floors people like me visit only when they carry tools. The Hotel Santa Marina has a roof terrace-potted lemon trees, white umbrellas, a view of the harbor like a forgiveness. I climbed the stairs and stopped just short of the terrace, one hand on the plaster that remembers different centuries. Isabela sat with her back to me at a table near the rail. Across from her, Vega. Between them, a small envelope. She reached for it the way you reach for a diagnosis. He placed his hand lightly on the envelope and did not slide it. From where I stood, the sea poured itself into the harbor and pretended to be democracy. A waiter set down water, and the glasses sweated like honest men. I stepped back into the stairwell and let the cool stone tell me about gravity. I didn't confront them. What would I have said? We don't own people by catching them between courses. I went back to the cafe and washed glasses until my hands shrank in the cold. When Isabela returned at noon, she had the look of someone who's been assured she will be remembered in the way she prefers. "I was at my mother's," she said. "How is her clasp?" I asked and immediately hated my mouth. "You followed me," she said. "I saw you." She set her bag down with a care that called itself kindness. "Say it." "I don't want what happens next to be defined by how well we perform," I said, surprising both of us. "I want you to tell me the truth like it's a thing we keep in the house." She looked at the fridge where we keep the milk, at the calendar where we circle nothing now, at the lemon bowl where the perfect lemon had been replaced by someone older and more honest. She nodded. "Tonight," she said, "after the dinner rush." We didn't have a dinner rush that night. A boat parade in the harbor kept everyone drunk elsewhere. I turned chairs upside down and said goodnight to tourists who wished me better luck with my next city. Isabela sat at the corner table, fingers at the swallow, and the espresso machine sounded like a sigh. "I met him at a planning meeting," she said. "He said the city deserved to be seen. He talked as if sunlight had hired him. He said he could help me sell more tiles." "You started making tiles for his hotel," I said. I started remembering what it felt like to be looked at by someone who sees a map in your face and wants to go there. "I look at you," I said. "You inventory me," she said gently. "You count the cups, and I am one of them. That's unfair." "So is gravity," she said. "It doesn't mean you can vote against it." I waited. "It became more," she said. "And then it became everything I couldn't say to you, because I wanted to be admired for being loyal more than I wanted to be loved for being honest." "Is it still more?" "Not the way people like to point at," she said. I ended it. He doesn't understand how endings work if he didn't edit them himself. Then why the envelope? Because he owes me and he denies it, she said. Because some men pay their debts in cash and some in control. Because I didn't want to be part of his hotel from the outside or the inside. And what does he owe you? Work, money, the drawings I made, the right to not be followed into my own city by someone who believes desire is a permit. And me? She looked at me as if weighing a stone she might drop in water to see how honest the splash could be. I owe you the truth, she said, and I owe you a kindness I should have practiced sooner. Which is? To leave, she said, before I destroy your house pretending I'm a saint. There are moments when the sea in our city goes completely flat for 3 breaths, a pause so perfect it feels like a plan. Then the smallest wave arrives and the whole bay remembers the algorithm. I nodded. Where will you go? My mother's for now, then a small place near the shipyard. Not his, mine. I've saved. Don't look like that. She smiled without teeth. You taught me to write things down, Daniel. I wrote down what I wanted, and it turned out the list began with a room I can lock without feeling like a thief. Will you still paint? Always, she said. Maybe less for other people. We didn't fight. We sorted. The plates had opinions. The books learned to live in 2 stacks. I slept on the sofa that night, and the city dialed down the streets until morning. Before dawn, I heard the wheels of her suitcase roll across the tiles, a sound like the last page turning. The sea took its time with me. Days went to salt. People asked without asking. I poured coffee and learned to be someone who answers gently. Vega walked into the café twice and walked out again before the door had a chance to hate him. My mother-in-law brought me soup and left without seeing the couch and its new politics. 3 nights later, the city did the things cities do when they have to celebrate and mourn at once. It planned fireworks for the saints and the wind forgot to RSVP. The bay filled with small boats anchored like punctuation on a story no one could agree on. Isabela was somewhere along the promenade. I didn't know where. Vega's hotel plans became a banner on the shipyard fence. Drawings of decks and umbrellas. Chairs facing a sea that does not care about chairs. The first thunder came from the east, a long roll. Someone cheered, not understanding. Then the wind came across the roofs like a dog that has smelled blood. Palm fronds whipped the street. The boats in the bay tugged at their ropes like animals that had realized the fence was a suggestion. The fireworks crew covered their crates and waved apologies at saints who do not file complaints. At the breakwater, the first wave hit wrong. You can feel them in your feet before you see them, the way dread arrives in the spine before a sentence can introduce itself. The second wave climbed over the low wall, and the third didn't ask for permission. 2 men who fish only on festivals abandoned their buckets and ran. The old lighthouse keeper at the end of the stones stood in his doorway, like a man waiting for his name. I went up the hill for height. From the terrace of the Santa Marina, I could see the bay go white where it shouldn't. A small boat-red hull, stubborn dragged anchor toward the shoals. A flare rose and then forgot what story it had come to tell. Somewhere in the tangle of water and rope and poor decisions, a figure stood and then didn't. Later, people would say a lot of things. They would say the boat was a rental, registered to no one because that is how men like Vega have decided to live. They would say a woman in a blue dress was seen on the stern, hair black against the lightning. They would say the flare was a cruel joke because help couldn't get across the wall fast enough when the wind makes its own laws. I don't remember deciding to go down there. I remember my lungs offering me a bargain. I remember hands pulling a rope against the pull of something older than hands. I remember a man shouting that the harbor police were on their way. I remember the red hull nosing the shoal and the wave that finished the sentence it had been writing for an hour. In the crash, there is a quiet that never makes sense. Then the noise comes back twice as loud to remind you physics keeps receipts. I saw a face in the mess. Then a hand. Then a flash of chain. I went into the water the way you go into a room where everyone already knows your name. It was colder than summer allows. It was heavier than religion. I found the chain first, the swallow catching on my fingers like a fish with no mercy. I found hair, and then her shoulder, and then her waist, and then other hands were there because cities remember how to be good when everyone knows the street. We dragged her onto the stones. Someone put a jacket under her head. Someone shouted for room, for light, for sense. Lightning obliged, petty and brief. Her eyes held. Her mouth argued with the air. She looked at me with the particular fury of someone who has decided to keep living on principle and is offended that oxygen has become a negotiation. Isabela, I said. She tried, failed, tried again. She said and coughed, and the sea left her grudgingly, a bad tenant. Where is he? Someone asked, and someone else swore. And away by the shoal, a man-shaped thing floated, and the harbor police did their work. And later they would find him, and it would be Vega, and everyone would say they always knew. Her hand found mine. Her fingers pressed the swallow into my palm the way you press a stamp into wax to prove you existed before the letter arrived. I'm sorry, she said, and the apology wasn't for the affair, or the envelope, or the hotel, or for leaving or for returning wrong. It was for the recipe of the day, for the lemon with the sticker, for the way our laundry has to be hung on a good breeze, for the small, faithful things that keep a marriage from believing it deserves poetry. You're here, and I said, that's enough. But it wasn't. The doctor in the crowd did his job. The city did its. The ambulance took her with a dignity I didn't have. At the hospital, the red hallway light turned everything into a rehearsal, and the nurse said to wait, and the waiting made a coward of me, and the sea kept moving, because it believes in schedules in a way we cannot. She lived until morning. The doctor said words that promise competence more than comfort. A lung, a tear, a too long time underwater. My hand kept the shape of her swallow as if metal could be taught to be warm. When they said now, I went in, and she looked like a person who had decided to be still, even while the machines went on pretending. Her eyes found my face, and she smiled the way people smile when the train finally arrives after a lifetime, and their bag is already on their shoulder. Forgive me, she whispered. I do, I said, and discovered I wasn't lying. Forgive me. She blinked once, slowly, the way a lighthouse does when no one needs reminding. For what? For inventorying you, I said. For being a good man when you needed a brave one. You were both, she said. You are. The window was open. The sea knew and didn't. A gull called as if it had news. The machine made sounds men have taught them. Isabela's hand loosened in mine like a knot, learning it didn't need to prove anything anymore. When her breath left, it took the smallest piece of my past and folded it into itself, and the room agreed to trust the present. We buried her on the hill with the view the city owes its dead. The fisherman with the loudest voice told a story about how she bought the ugliest sardines out of pity and made them holy. My mother-in-law said the things mothers say to the air and made an arrangement with God about future weather. I placed the swallow chain in the box with her and did not pretend it would do anything useful where she was going. I kept the clasp. The city went back to work the next day because we have no other jobs. Vega's hotel plans paused, then limped, then were taken over by a consortium with a name like a deodorant. People said justice happened, but men like him don't go to prison in the way you think. They go to other cities and close other windows. The cafe opened at 7. Someone ordered a macchiato and a sparkling water, and we didn't run out of change. I sold the cafe that winter to a couple from farther inland who thought the sea would cure them. Maybe it will. I gave them the espresso machine with its cough and the calendar and the lemon bowl. I kept the hook where the swallow used to hang because you have to leave some absence in a room so you know who lived there. At night, I walk the breakwater to the lighthouse and say names out loud when the wind is polite. Isabela, my father, the fisherman who died the winter of the storm. Evan, the city keeps them without showing off. Some days I swear I see a red hull out by the shoal, and then I don't because memory and mirage are cousins who borrow each other's clothes. People ask me if I hate the sea now. I don't. The sea is the most honest thing we have. We lie, we send envelopes, we cheat. We come back and ask to be forgiven. The water does one thing with perfect conviction. When it's rough, it tells you. When it's flat, it lies only to your sense of security, not to your intelligence. It took my wife and then gave her back long enough to say goodbye, which is more than many people get, and maybe that counts for something if you let it. Once a week, I visit my mother-in-law with oranges from Lara that remember the tree. We sit by the window and watch the fairies. She asks if I'm eating, and I say yes. She asks if I'm seeing anyone, and I say not yet, and we both pretend we are talking about the weather. Before I go, I straighten the frames on her wall, and one is always crooked again the next week because houses keep their own time. On the day I finally locked the door to our apartment for the last time, I left Isabela's brushes in a jar with a note for the next tenant. Leave the window open when you can. The sea likes to be let in. I took nothing from the balcony. The lemon tree she'd coaxed into forgiving pot life had 3 small fruits and a stubborn flower. I told it a bad joke, and it pretended not to hear. The city keeps going. The gulls rehearse their insults. The shipyard banner fades to the same yellow as the hotel awnings. In the café I no longer own, a couple leans over coffee and decides whether to tell each other the truth. I hope they do. The fairy horns do what fairies do at dusk, telling water and shore where they imagine they belong. On the breakwater, the lighthouse blinks 1, 2, 3 counting, not people, not sins, not names, just distance and the fact that some endings are complete. I walk to the end and hold the clasp between finger and thumb and let the wind decide if it wants it. It doesn't. The metal learns my heat and keeps it. The sea says the thing it always says, which is that it will go on, and for once the sound doesn't feel like an insult. It feels like an instruction the city and I both understand. That's the whole story. It doesn't have a trick in it. It begins with a lemon and ends with a clasp. In between are all the things people do to each other when they are too afraid to name what they want. I loved a woman who loved light, and she left and she came back for 1 hour because death is generous in exactly that way. It lets you close the door you opened by accident. I'm closing it now. The latch fits. The wind checks and approves. The sea takes a breath and returns it. Somewhere the hotel will open on time, and people will face the water and pretend it is looking back at them. Somewhere a woman ties a swallow to her neck and decides who she intends to be. Somewhere a man learns the difference between admiring and inventorying. Somewhere there is a lemon with a sticker and someone who notices. Here the evening lays itself down on the city and makes it look holy. I walk home along the harbor wall, past the bait shop, past the stairs where we once sat and decided to be married, past the tile shop with swallows arranged like departures. In the quiet of my new room, I place the clasp in a dish and listen to the small sound it makes. And for the first time in months, it doesn't sound like an ending, trying to be a beginning. It sounds like a period where it belongs. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.